I never thought a quiet life on my own property would turn into a full-blown legal circus. But that's exactly what happened when Karen from the HOA decided I was her next target. Thing is, I don't even live in her HOA. Yep, you heard that? Right? I live outside the boundary, on land that was never part of her precious community rules. But that didn't stop her from slapping me with a lawsuit, claiming I was somehow bringing down the value of her neighborhood. At first, I thought it was some sort of prank. I mean, who sues someone for not being part of their HOA? But nope, this was real. I got served papers on a Sunday morning, right as I was sipping coffee in my driveway. Karen stood there smirking behind the process server like she'd already won. She even had the nerve to wave at me like this was some neighborly dispute. But it wasn't. This was about control. It's about a woman so obsessed with power that she thought she could reach beyond her jurisdiction just because she didn't like what she saw over the fence. Now, I'm no lawyer, but I do know how to read, and a few late nights digging through property records, zoning maps, and HOA documents revealed the truth. Not only was I not under her authority, but I found something that completely turned the tables. When I showed up to court, I wasn't nervous. I was Kambik. I knew I could end her entire case with just one short statement in 3 minutes. Later, that courtroom was dead silent. But what exactly did I say that made her lawyer drop his pen and the judge raise an eyebrow? Stick around, because you're not going to believe how fast Karen's little power trip completely backfired. Let me back up and explain how this all started, because trust me, it didn't come out of nowhere. I moved into my home a couple of years ago, just outside the limits of a gated neighborhood with a pretty strict HOA. I picked this place specifically because I didn't want to deal with anyone telling me what color my door could be or how tall my grass should grow. The land I bought was zoned residential, completely independent and not tied to any homeowners association. That was a big deal for me. Freedom, privacy, and peace. Everything was fine for a while until Karen showed up. I didn't even know her name at first, just saw her walking her tiny dog past my fence, giving my house the side eye every time. She started small passive-aggressive comments about my driveway, flyers about neighborhood standards mysteriously showing up in my mailbox, even though I wasn't part of their community. I brushed it off, figured she just needed a hobby. Then one day, I get a letter claiming I was in violation of the HOA's landscaping guidelines. I laughed at first, thinking it was some clerical error, but then came another one, and then another. Eventually, I learned Karen was the president of the HOA board, and she had it in her head that my property should have been part of their development. She actually said that in an email she mistakenly CC'd me on. That's when I realized this wasn't just pettiness. It was personal. Karen was trying to force me into HOA compliance through intimidation and paperwork. She claimed her bylaws extended over my land due to a grandfathered-in clause from some obscure agreement I'd never seen. And that's where things got shady. The more I looked, the more I realized how shaky her claims weren't, how much she was counting on me not fighting back. But she underestimated one thing. I don't like being pushed around. Let me back up and explain how this all started, because trust me, it didn't come out of nowhere. I moved into my home a couple of years ago, just outside the limits of a gated neighborhood with a pretty strict HOA. I picked this place specifically because I didn't want to deal with anyone telling me what color my door could be or how tall my grass should grow. The land I bought was zoned residential, completely independent and not tied to any homeowners association. That was a big deal for me. Freedom, privacy, and peace. Everything was fine for a while until Karen showed up. I didn't even know her name at first, just saw her walking her tiny dog past my fence, giving my house the side eye every time. She started small passive-aggressive comments about my driveway, flyers about neighborhood standards mysteriously showing up in my mailbox even though I wasn't part of their community. I brushed it off, figured she just needed a hobby. Then one day, I get a letter claiming I was in violation of the HOA's landscaping guidelines. I laughed at first, thinking it was some clerical error, but then came another one, and then another. Eventually, I learned Karen was the president of the HOA board and she had it in her head that my property should have been part of their development. She actually said that in an email she mistakenly CC'd me on. That's when I realized this wasn't just pettiness. It was personal. Karen was trying to force me into HOA compliance through intimidation and paperwork. She claimed her bylaws extended over my land due to a grandfathered-in clause from some obscure agreement I'd never seen. And that's where things got shady. The more I looked, the more I realized how shaky her claims were and how much she was counting on me not fighting back. But she underestimated one thing. I don't like being pushed around, so I started digging. Nights and weekends, I poured through everything: county records, zoning ordinances, historical plat maps, HOA formation documents. I even pulled satellite images and building permits from over a decade ago. And the deeper I went, the more obvious it became. Karen had no legal footing. My land had never been annexed, never petitioned into the HOA, and had never signed any covenants. It was like she was making up rules just to feel in control. But Karen didn't back off. In fact, she doubled down. One morning, I woke up to find a notice taped to my door saying I was being fined $150 a day for non-compliance. Keep in mind, wasn't even part of their HOA. The notice wasn't from the county or a city department. It was from her. Signed by her HOA board, complete with their letterhead like they had actual jurisdiction. That's when I realized she was trying to build a paper trail. A fake record of violations she could use to pressure the court. A week later, I got served. She actually hired a lawyer and filed a civil complaint accusing me of damaging neighborhood property values, violating aesthetic standards, and get this operating as a rogue resident. I wish I was joking. Her legal team filed 23 pages of accusations, most of them built around things like the color of my garage door and the fact that I parked a trailer in my driveway for a weekend. She really thought she had me backed into a corner. The court date came fast. As I walked into that small courtroom, I could see Karen sitting confidently in the front row. Arms crossed, smug look on her face like she was about to give a TED Talk on neighborhood justice. Her lawyer looked just as sure of himself, but they had no idea what was coming. I wasn't just ready, I had brought the one document that would flip the whole thing upside down, just as the judge called the hearing to order. Something unexpected happened that changed everything. Karen's lawyer began confidently presenting their case, reading through the list of supposed violations and emphasizing how I was damaging the community by refusing to comply. Then, out of nowhere, the judge paused and asked for the original HOA boundary map. Karen's lawyer fumbled through his papers but couldn't find the actual signed mapta, one that legally defined the HOA's limits. Instead, he handed over a blurry copy with handwritten notes and questionable dates. That's when I saw my chance. I quietly handed the judge the official certified map I'd found buried in county archives, a document no one in that courtroom expected. It clearly showed my property was outside the HOA boundaries. The judge scrutinized the map, then looked back at Karen and her lawyer with a raised eyebrow. Tension filled the room. Karen's confident smirk vanished, replaced by nervous glances and whispered conversations between her lawyer and the HOA board members sitting behind her. But just when I thought the case was about to fall apart, Karen dropped another bombshell. She claimed that a secret agreement existed, an unsigned, verbal pact between her HOA and a previous owner of my land that somehow extended their authority. The judge looked skeptical, but allowed Karen to introduce this claim. Suddenly, what? seemed like an open and shut case turned into a tangled mess of he said, she said, and legal gray areas. Now, the stakes were higher than ever. It wasn't just about a simple boundary dispute anymore. It was about power, influence, and whether one person could rewrite the rules to suit their own agenda. The courtroom felt electric, every eye glued to the next move. I knew this fight wasn't over, but I was ready to show that sometimes the truth doesn't need a loud voice, just needs the right evidence. And I had plenty more of that. The judge leaned back in his chair, clearly weighing everything carefully. After a moment of silence that felt like forever, he asked me to present my evidence regarding the so-called secret agreement Karen had mentioned. I calmly pulled out a stack of documents, emails, old property deeds, even a recorded phone call from the previous owner denying any such pact existed. It was like dropping a truth bomb right in the middle of the courtroom. Karen's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand. As I laid out the facts, the courtroom shifted. The supposed verbal agreement turned out to be nothing more than a rumor Karen had spread among the neighborhood to justify her overreach. With every piece of proof, her case crumbled faster. The judge's expression grew firmer, and it was clear he wasn't buying any of her claims. Then came the moment I'll never forget. The judge looked directly at Karen and said, "Your lawsuit is dismissed in its entirety. There's no legal basis for this case." The room was stunned. Karen's face went pale, and she sat frozen, unable to respond. Her lawyer quietly gathered his papers, avoiding eye contact. I could hardly believe it. After months of stress, harassment, and legal threats, justice had finally been served. But just when I thought it was over, the judge added something that caught everyone off guard. "However," he continued, "given the frivolous nature of this lawsuit and the clear misuse of legal processes, I am referring this matter to the county attorney for possible sanctions against the HOA and its president." Karen's smirk was gone. The tables had completely turned, and now she faced consequences far beyond the court case. I walked out of that courtroom knowing I had stood up for my rights and that sometimes standing your ground means more than men. Winning a single battle, it means showing that truth and fairness can't be pushed aside, no matter how loud someone yells. After the courtroom emptied and the noise faded, I stood outside feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. It wasn't just about winning the case, it was about standing up to someone who tried to control my life from a distance. Karen's attempt to drag me into her HOA drama backfired so badly that it opened the door for others in the neighborhood to question her leadership and the HOA's overreach. I heard later that the county attorney did investigate, and the HOA faced fines and warnings for their misuse of legal actions. It was a clear message. You can't bully people with baseless lawsuits and expect to get away with it. This whole experience taught me a lot about the importance of knowing your rights and standing firm when someone tries to push you around. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when a legal battle starts, especially against an organized group like an HOA. But with patience, research, and a little courage, you can protect yourself and even turn the situation around. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't let Karen intimidate me. Sometimes people use power to make others feel small, but the truth doesn't need to be loud to be strong. My little corner outside the HOA remains just that, mine. I've since heard from other neighbors outside that HOA who faced similar harassment. And I hope my story encourages them to stand up to Dot. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. If you ever find yourself tangled in HOA drama or facing unfair legal pressure, remember, knowledge is power. And fighting back isn't just about winning, it's about protecting your peace and your home. If you want to hear more stories like Squally 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 Mix, only Ruby Kiss has the luxurious texture that glides on, not go Squally 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 Mick, and Lies lost whole long-lasting color, and Fix Law Last K's my liced case. And squally mix, my mill stay, my millie school. If you want to see it squally, my squally, my squally, millie whiz, my squally, said, but it kind of crap. We unmilli it, by we sit. We ekikits alpate I usakit etikit sigreed it to siglits, cause it bid as it quit it was it it's a stick pit it's cause piece it this or need advice on handling tricky neighborhood conflicts? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. I've got plenty more to share.